Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening, depending upon where you are. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times. I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Self-Service in Cloud Automation, Getting It Right. It's a discussion about unburdening developers from platform building so they can focus on doing their core tasks. Before we get started, I have a couple of brief housekeeping announcements. First, today's session will be followed by a live Q&A. And you can ask a question at any time during the presentation from your control panel. Click on the questions tab, type it in, and we'll answer as many as time allows. Second, today's session is being recorded and we will be available on demand on the sdtimes.com website starting tomorrow. As we've been reporting in SD Times and on IT Ops Times, organizations today are adopting agile and DevOps approaches to software development and deployment to release software faster and remain competitive. Giving developers the ability to spin up the infrastructure they need to complete their tasks is essential to meet those goals of speed and quality. With me today is Maya Burr-Lerner. She's Chief Technology Officer at Quali, which provides a platform for cloud automation at scale. Maya will look at different approaches organizations take to enable self-service infrastructure provisioning and discuss the benefits of each. Maya joined Quali in 2007, and before her current position, she served as VP of Product Management and in a variety of key management roles at the company, including systems engineering and sales. So let me turn it over to Maya to dive right in. So take it away, Maya.
Thank you, David. Great to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about self-service in cloud automation. So let's dive in. Okay, so I want to start from why I care about it. I'm a CTO, and one of the things I care most about is how to make my company move faster. And when it comes to my area of responsibility, it means that the applications that we build at Quali need to move faster. And in order to do that, the application teams in my company need access to applications. When I say applications, I mean the services that we're developing and the applications and the third-party components that we're using. And the teams need them to do their jobs, right? They need to develop, they need to plan before that, they need to test, they need to deploy to production, they need to do CI/CD. And if they don't get access to these applications in a timely manner, they will just have to get back to me and tell me, oh, Maya, we're really sorry. There are tons of great ideas coming from the business, but we just can't be as agile as you ask us to be because we're waiting for application environments, right? So actually, below the surface for what they need, right? Because we're in the age of CI/CD and applications and containers, and we're automating everything. So what are they really waiting for? What's really under the surface, and the reason they may be waiting in many cases is because all of these tasks and all of these application environments, they all need some infrastructure to be on. And today, more often than not, it's cloud infrastructure. Surely, if your company is cloud first or even cloud only, and Gartner just published in last year that they expect a third of all new software, I think, to be cloud only within 6 months. And then in this period, COVID happened. So maybe what we're dealing with is better described these days as this cat in Zoom. And obviously, it becomes worse when all of my teams are suddenly remote and they're still expecting to be productive and get all the environments that they're looking for, and it still needs to happen on the cloud. And there's this IDC report that I just saw in June that predicted that cloud adoption will continue to grow through 2020, and it will actually become more than half of the overall IT spending on infrastructure. So everyone is moving to cloud, and this is creating a lot of possibilities in this age for providing our teams with the environments they need, but it also creates some new problems because there are a lot of things, and it's pretty complex to provide the teams everything they need under the surface. And Obviously, I think everyone already understands by now that the right way to get cloud to all these people, all these teams that need it, is to automate the provisioning of cloud. So automation is the key to getting it right. I'm sure you have heard or talked about infrastructure as code and about programmable infrastructure. These are all becoming very hot topics today. Going back to Gartner again, they just published in July the hype cycle for Agile and DevOps, and you could see that the infrastructure automation is in what they call the trough of disillusionment, which is actually a good thing. It sounds really bad, but it's the part where everyone gets that they actually need this technology, and they also start to understand the challenges. So if we know that the right way to get all these people that need application environments, we need to get cloud to them, and we want to do it with automation, then the question is, okay, so how is this automation even different than all the other automation types that we're talking about in general when we talk about CI/CD and just making this entire process automated? And I think the answer is that the main thing that cloud automation is different in is that the application teams are the ones that need the cloud infrastructure, but traditionally, they are not the ones who've been provisioning it for themselves. It actually belonged to other roles, usually IT. And when we look at cloud, it's a very dynamic landscape of resources, and it's actual things that cost money and that hackers could be plotting to attack right now. So everything we automate here can be pretty dangerous in a way, or risky, and it can cause some damage to our business. So when we think about people having to automate cloud provisioning, the first thing that you need in order to make this happen is to code, right? If you software engineering skill. And a very common thing when you look at technical forums like Reddit, someone goes there and says, "What do I need to do to be DevOps?" And you'll get like 50 answers, and the first one and the 50th one says you have to be a coder. So that's right. You need software engineering skills. If you're not a coder, that's a problem, right? Because everything is code today. But then that's not the only thing that you need, because you're automating something specific here, and it's cloud. And you need to understand how to program infrastructure as code. So you also need to understand infrastructure as code. You need to know at least one standard and tool and decide what you're doing there. And you don't just get these skills for free just because you know how to code. And once you have these two skills, then you become fast, potentially. You can make these tasks happen faster. But in a way, it also makes you dangerous, because it's like knowing all the words of the language, but you don't necessarily know how to compose a meaningful sentence. And why is that? Because if you want to use it correctly, it's more than just having good software architecture. You actually need to make sure that you're not making any cloud mistakes, and you need to have good architecture. And you need to make sure that you're not creating any risk. So for example, just because I can code and I'm familiar with how CloudFormation work, it doesn't mean that I can create a HIPAA compliant environment, because I don't know what a HIPAA compliant environment looks like. It doesn't mean that I know how to optimize the capacity that I need in terms of cost and cost effectiveness. And it doesn't mean that I'm on top of everything that I need in order to make the environment secure. So if I want to acquire all these capabilities that will also make automating the cloud low risk, I need to have this whole list of capabilities. And I think what we can see in our industry today is that, going back to that person that went on a technical forum and said, "What do I need to do to be DevOps?" Then the answer that you get right after be a coder is that it just drops like 45 technologies and tools and buzzwords that the poor person needs to actually drop in their CV in order to be considered for a DevOps or cloud provisioning job. And that's a big problem, because there are not a lot of people that have all these capabilities. It's actually usually not just one person. And they, it's usually a few groups even that in many companies don't know that they are supposed to be getting along yet. They are people that have the capabilities to automate properly and still stay SOC 2 or GDPR or HIPAA compliant, and also keep software engineering best practices. So we have this little group of people that can do that, but then we have a much bigger audience than that needs access to applications, and they are on cloud resources or services in the cloud. And that includes a big bunch of people, that's like the bigger group at the top, that need access to application environments, but they are not coders. And it will not add any value if we ask them to know anything about cloud or automation. And the obvious groups are business and product people, right? They can't code usually, but they still need to get access to application environments. But I've seen some examples of PhDs that develop really sophisticated algorithms for something else, maybe security, and they happen not to know anything about how to, about EC2 or about VNet or what Docker means. They shouldn't, they have better things to do. And then we have the group in the middle, and these are technical people, and they can provision their own cloud if you ask them to. They may even prefer to do it if you give them the option, because they just know it would be faster. But it doesn't really add value for us that they spend time on it just because they can. And another thing is that they don't necessarily have the cloud expertise, all the low risk skills that I mentioned, to get us out of trouble as they try to automate things. So I think one of the most important questions for people like me today, or people that are dealing with consumption of cloud, is how do we make sure that we can get cloud automation if we're doing it? How can we get that to these two different groups of people that really can't code and the people that can code, but maybe we don't want them to be doing it in the context of cloud provisioning? So what I'm going to talk about today is review a few different approaches to cloud self-service, see what's common in the industry today, and when we should use which approach, and what each approach really involves. Let's start with number one. So number one is really the traditional approach, and it's I think how the concept of self-service in the cloud started. You want cloud? No worries, open a ticket, I'll give you cloud, right? The core element in this approach is that you have an IT ops group, and they use some ticketing system like ServiceNow or Zendesk or Salesforce or some IT service management system. It doesn't really matter, it could be email in some cases. And you write the resources or the environments that you need, you put it in a nice request form, and then there's this team of cloud experts, and they fulfill your request. And of course, before they fulfill their request, there's a certain process where they review your request and they add from their expertise, making sure that what you ask is secure and that it's cost effective. They don't have any suggestions. And sometimes it also needs to go through more than one person. And then you have like this whole approval flow that you need to go through. And it's very common, I think, to see, in addition to this ticketing system, to start connecting it to tools or to scripts, the bash script, or provisioning and automation tools like CloudFormation or like Terraform, anything that would help the IT ops team to do their job faster. And I call this approach extreme risk averse, because it really gives you the best control that you can have on things like cost and security and compliance. Because if every resource that someone asks for goes through this central team of experts, then the chances of losing control or misplacing resources or not being able to audit are really low. So you're really gaining confidence in the way that you use cloud. But of course, you pay the price of a bottleneck in your user experience. So when we look at the, what this approach means, you can see that governance gets 5 stars, but your end users, whether they are coders or non-coders, and really regardless of their skills, they don't have any autonomy. Everything has to go through you. And this is increasingly a problem. So let's review this approach in more detail. In this approach, the time that it takes for people to get resources is usually at least few days, because you need to fill out a ticket and someone needs to review it, and then they do the actual provisioning, they're on vacation and so on. So it really means that the speed that you can do things is rather low. The focus in this approach is you're really trying to fight for defining the minimal required approval flows, because you don't want it to be too robust, but you still want it. And then what we usually see in this approach is that you try to automate as much as possible with scripting. So that would be something that would be a focus. And you'll probably have to offer some analytics and maybe implement a chargeback model to make sure that you can deal with the teams, and that you can, in a way, compensate on how sometimes slow the process can be. Makes team feel, develop high commitment relationship with cloud instances, which is not a good thing. So you need to explain how much it costs. And the biggest risk in this first approach of a ticketing system for self-service to cloud automation is that really very few people today are willing to wait for 2 weeks to get access to cloud resources these days. Especially if they feel that they can do it themselves in 10 minutes. And you probably know these arguments. So what then happens is usually one of two. There's the group of users that can really do without us, right? They can just go on the, to the cloud, and they can consume resources, and they know how to automate. And what will sometimes happen then is that when we try to provide self-service, these users will come to us and tell us, oh no, we're doing really a very special cloud native thing. And it's very, very specialized. So we need our own sub account, and you open a sub account for them. And then everyone that wants, prefers not to go through your self-service does that. So that's one part of one group. And then the other group is everyone that's really a captive audience, because they can't do it. They can't just go to Amazon and consume resources and do their own things. And then what happens with that group is that they really start wanting to have resources for as long as possible. And then the problem with that is that they refuse to let go of resources. And then your challenge becomes, how do I decommission? And this is still a very common approach number one to self-service infrastructure. I see it a lot, but I think it's becoming very hard to justify this approach. It could work for cases where you really require very static or long-term cloud resources for environments that are really, really traditional or high risk. I think in other words, the bottom line, like, unless everyone in your industry takes this approach because they absolutely have to, then you will not be able to be competitive in the long term if you do that. Okay, so now let's go to approach number 2, and I hope everyone is enjoying the fact that there is also UI. So approach 2 is really become more popular in the past like 5 years or so, and I would call it control first. And in this approach, you actually use a platform that is dedicated to cloud management. There are a lot of examples for this in the market. Companies, I'll just mention maybe some of the more prominent ones in this market, like Flexera and Scalar and Morpheus and so on. And this is not a general IT tool like a ticketing system. It's a dedicated tool that usually keeps an inventory of resources, and it allows you to know what's happening with your resources at any given time, and to define policies and help you control these resources. And then you can, for example, provide teams with quota and say, you're getting this, you're getting that, and so on. So cloud management platforms can also have different levels of provisioning capabilities, and they sometimes also include some monitoring and disaster recovery and features like that. And I think the great progress here compared to approach number 1 is that they really can expose this catalog of templates or resources to the end users. And that gives end users more autonomy than they had in approach 1, which was nothing. So you actually get something to choose from. And if you choose one of the approved templates, you don't need to wait for anyone. It just gets provisioned, and you can fully leverage this automation. Developers get the same level of autonomy as end users that are non-coders here. so they sometimes don't like it. It's not exactly what they want. And the emphasis is still very much on control, because everything really starts from policies and how do we govern the use of cloud, and then everything else is attached to it. So this doesn't work amazing with automation, but it's much better and much more efficient than a ticket request connected to automation. And it solves a lot of the frustrating aspects of approach number one. And let's drill a little bit into that. So the time that it takes team to get infrastructure in this case could be, from minutes if they see a template that they want and they just click on it, to sometimes hours, really depending on the infrastructure. And then if the template doesn't exist, then it becomes a little bit more of an issue, and we need to start asking for this template, and then it could take days to weeks to create it. The focus here is often starting from inventory. Most of the cloud management platforms started from inventory management, so a lot of it is around populating it and controlling it. And then we need to make sure that we're creating templates that our end users would actually want to get access to. And then we need to put policies and apply these policies on them. And we need to have a good way to allow requests for new templates, because that's going to be our new bottleneck, right? This is where we sometimes go back to emails or to IT ticketing systems or any other means of telling the central team, hey, I need this new template, so please make it for me and put it in the catalog. And you still need to invest in things like analytic and chargebacks, this could be a little bit challenging, but it could work if things aren't too dynamic. The risk in this approach is that, well, first of all, the inventory approach is becoming a little bit problematic, but let's say that you're not that dynamic. Still, the biggest bottleneck that you're going to have is that end users are going to lose patience if they need new templates very frequently, or if they are making changes in the templates very frequently. And then it doesn't work very well, because otherwise you just go to the catalog, they choose something. But when they see something in the catalog and say, oh, I don't want it to be just like that, I actually want to move this and change it to something else, and this takes 3 weeks, then we're back to the starting point. And I think the place where it usually doesn't work is DevOps. This is where we see the bottlenecks, because engineers would want more flexibility, and they know their application better, and they want to make a lot of changes in it. And then when we need this sort of flexibility, what will sometimes happen with this approach is that engineers will ask for their own cloud account, and then we're back to the risk that we described in approach number one, where you have these two tracks, where some teams just go there and they say, come to you and they say, oh, you know what, we're sorry, we have a very special use case and we need our own cloud account. So you just separate that from the other type of self-service. And what happens is that you're actually maintaining two types of self-service. One of them is developed by your engineers. And I think the secret to making approach number two work is if you have low change frequency. So it can work for a lot of non-DevOps use cases where the templates are pretty static, things like hosting third-party products if they don't change much, or POC and demos and trainings of products that don't change that much. And it can also be okay for DevOps if this is a first milestone for an organization that have just started adopting agile practices, and this is what they're using for other purposes, unless they really face strong rejection from the development teams, which at some point will probably happen. This could also be a pretty reasonable trade-off in case you're in a very extreme, security or compliance industry, a sensitive industry that really needs to make sure things are in control. But let's move to approach 3. Approach 3 is a completely different animal, and it puts speed and innovation first. And this is sometimes, we talked about it actually, because it's a spin-off from approach 1 or 2. If you remember the cloud native special use case that must have their own sub account, the approach is really, really simple. That's the nice thing about it. You give the dev teams credentials for a cloud account or for a sub account, and that's it. This is where the rules end. It's kind of a trust-based model. And for most coders, I think that would be the preferred method. And I do see some complaints from developers that say, you know, I shouldn't be doing that. I don't like the responsibility that comes with it. I don't want to be in charge, you know, role responsible if people are now starting to look for security breaches in this architecture. I know how to code. Doesn't mean that I'm a cloud expert. I do see that. But on the other hand, the autonomy level that you get is awesome. So, you know, 5 stars for dev autonomy. Problem, of course, for end users that can't code, it's a different story. They don't have that at all. They don't have any autonomy, and they need to get serviced in another way. And this could mean that we need to actually maintain 2 approaches side by side, as we discussed. So approach 3 really works only for coders. And I have seen some people say, okay, so we're going to only hire coders. It sounds really expensive to me, but that's an option. Another thing here that no stars is the governance, right? There's no built-in governance. So any control mechanisms really depends on my team's skills, and it really needs to be custom built. Let's drill down into this approach. The time that the teams take to get infrastructure, immediate. That's wonderful about this. The focus here is going to be mainly upskilling and training, right? Because we're starting to hire everyone is, you know, everyone's coders, great, but now we need to teach them infrastructure as code. So everyone needs to be taught CloudFormation or Terraform or something. And now on top of that, we need to teach them how to do things in a secure way, and we need to teach them how to do things in a compliant way and try to enforce that. So this would be the focus. And then you have quite a lot of risk with this approach. And the risk in general is much higher than the other approaches. First of all, you have developers and DevOps teams that are spending time on things that add 0 value to the business, and they are creating, you know, they're accumulating technical debt, which is a problem because they get swamped in things that really don't add any value to the business. Also, you get tons of cloud sub-accounts. That's a big problem because it's very hard to manage, and you're starting to get unexplained cloud bills, and it's really hard to control. Another risk that you have is that you're starting to use scripts to try to optimize that. You know, I've seen things like a script that shuts down all the idle resources, and a script that shuts down everything that isn't tagged correctly, and a script, you know, a script and that, and it, you know, it's just hard to manage. It's also becomes difficult to standardize decommissioning. It's difficult to standardize consistent tagging, and you always have these other groups of non-coders that are just not serviced at all, and you sometimes need to keep another tool for them, because that's really, you know, sad, because you're trying to minimize and to reuse your automation, but here you're actually creating 2 sets of automation. And this approach, I think, is really suitable for small teams and or you know, really internal low-risk applications where you don't have special compliance requirements and you don't need to scale the operation in the visible future. So you're just trying to do something fast and very cheap. So that's for you. And the newest approach is, I call it scale oriented. And, you know, it's really trying to find the right balance between provisioning faster and servicing faster, but also keeping in control. And this is the approach that we are taking at Quali. I strongly believe that this is the only way to scale cloud automation specifically for DevOps. And this approach, it offers a mixed self-service model, and it addresses the different ways that cloud automation can be triggered in a DevOps context. So it's either by a machine-to-machine interface like CI/CD pipeline, or a developer, or a team member that can't code. So it's really about giving all the different options, starting from creating the building blocks, creating templates from building blocks, and just using templates if that's what you know how to do. So that really requires a very tiered approach that is very modular. The nice thing is that if you use this approach and you apply policies in this level, then you don't need to have a new approval flow if you want to create a new template. And that means that everyone gets the same level of access to cloud automation. So in this approach, it takes maybe minutes to get on-demand access to a template that's already there. It can take somewhere between minutes to hours to build a template from the existing building blocks, but then you don't have to wait anymore. Or you can create a new building blocks, which would, again, also take somewhere between maybe minutes to hours. And then your focus, of course, moves to building blocks creation. So you're trying to offer building blocks to the teams. You're applying policies as code on these building blocks and on the templates, and you're training teams to be able to create their own building blocks in case they need it. The risk in this case is that you really need to have the right structure to do it, because what you're trying to do here is you're trying to take the best of two worlds. You're trying to bring IT, the IT-centric approach on one hand, and the developer-centric approach, like the approach number 3, and you try to mesh them together. And in order to do that, you need to have in the same team talking together people that understand cloud and people that understand automation. And that means you have to have a team like that, or that these people should be talking to one another. It's not always the case for many organizations. So this is something that you need to make sure happens before you try to adopt this approach. And if right now your IT ops and your engineering are not on speaking terms, and it's a big company, then sometimes you need to create something like a platform team, and that would be very suitable for DevOps use case. And creating a team like that obviously would make sense if you have a few development teams, right? It doesn't make sense to create a team like that if you have one other team that uses their services. So it takes a certain size or a certain plane to scale in order to adopt this approach. So to summarize, if you're thinking about providing self-service to cloud provisioning, and I think you need to start with identifying your current approach and the needs, starting from thinking, okay, what is the cloud use case, and what are the ways that people get access to cloud today? How do we provide them with the service? Who are really the end users, and what do they need? And then when you do that, you can start thinking and choosing the right strategy for you, depending on the type of your type of company, how you're using cloud. If the use of cloud is something that's very limited to some applications, or is it something that is expected to grow for many companies? It's many of us are planning to be cloud only or cloud first. So that's a big thing to consider. And also, the use case, if it's really mostly non-DevOps because we're just hosting other products maybe in the cloud, something like that, or is it mainly development? For a company like ours, where the main cloud consumption for us would be developing our products, and then it becomes the DevOps use case becomes a very important use case for us. So I'm going, continuing with DevOps, because I think this is the main reason cloud self-service needs some rethink for many people. Cloud automation is really an essential part of any DevOps platform. And I believe we need to treat any DevOps platform like a product. The thing about this product is that this product is not our core business. We're not developing this product to make business. We're developing this product in order to make it possible to develop products that are our core business. So I think that making sure that our development teams don't waste time on cloud provisioning and on the DevOps platform tying things together is very important. Cloud automation is really a subset of the DevOps platform. So making sure that developers don't waste time on building a self-service platform, and really that they can develop, that they can focus on developing features that we care about, I think is something that we should all remember when we're making these choices. Great. So I think, David, there you are. We're ready for.
Excellent. Yeah, so we'll go into a couple of the questions that we have here. One of them is somebody picked up on you saying that these cloud management platforms are focused on inventory of resources. So why is that a problem?
Right. Yes, I didn't go too much into that, but the inventory approach is a little bit risky technologically if you are using mainly cloud, because there are a lot more. The cloud is a lot more dynamic, and inventory means you say I have A, B, and C, but that becomes a problem if you're working with something that's very dynamic, and resources or containers just go up and down, and things and resources in general that are provisioned dynamically. The more dynamic you are, then the approach of saying, oh, I have this, I have boxes A, B, and C, it becomes less relevant. This approach is really fine if you're working with on-prem assets. Surely in the physical days we had, we could see the server and we'd say, okay, this is the server, you're getting the server. But these days are gone. And with them, I think also the approach of really putting things in an inventory, unless you have an inventory of physical things. So it doesn't really work that well for cloud resources. I hope it makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Another attendee asked a question. They're currently using Terraform, so they're wondering if they can still have the approach number 4 to infrastructure provisioning.
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes, the short answer. And I think this is a really common transition, and because automation usually starts from someone that can code, that sees all the tedious work that's happening and says, oh, wait, we can do that much faster. And then they just go online and they just, they Google infrastructure automation and they get something like CloudFormation or ARM templates or Terraform or something free and with an open source community. And this is how it starts. And then when we have some of this automation in place, suddenly we sometimes realize that, oh, wait, we built all these things and now, but we need self-service, or we built all these things and we need to govern them better. And then you need to add these capabilities. And then one option is to develop all of these capabilities yourself to get to, approach number 4 and just tie things together. I'm saying just, but it's a very expensive and time-consuming thing. And another option, is something like what we're offering, and that's going for a SaaS solution like Colony that that Quali is developing, and it will integrate with Terraform assets, and it will give you all these capabilities out of the box. So these are some of the things that you can choose from.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, just a last reminder to people, if you have a question, submit it now, and we will get to as many, as I said, as time will allow. Here's another question that we have, a little vague. It says, my company has 2 products. Does it make sense to get a product for self-service? I'm assuming the 2 products they have also deal with provisioning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, it goes back to the question of, how many, maybe I hope that I get it right. How many teams do you really need to self-service before it makes sense to really think about self-service, right? Because I think, if you're 4 developers working in a garage, sitting in the same location, you're all admins of everything and best friends also, or not, maybe it doesn't make sense to invest in self-service right now because you're all sitting together in the garage and you don't have, extra money to spend on anything. But as soon as there are more people involved, and then it starts making more sense. I think a rule of thumb would be, when people start spending a lot of time on provisioning and they're where they really shouldn't, where it takes a big part of their time, and you're starting thinking about getting someone who would do that, it's a good time to think maybe you should get just something that does that as a service. And when you can start thinking, oh, wait, it saves me money because I don't need to get some, my people don't spend a quarter of their time, my expensive developers don't spend a quarter of their time servicing people that need provisioning. Or sometimes, it could happen the first time that you have some security issue, or that you understand that people did something really horrible with instances that started and were not private, things like that. And then you say, okay, I really need to find a more formal solution for that. I read somewhere that 4 teams is the tipping point usually for servicing. But I think in an industry that is more sensitive in terms of security and compliance, you may want to think about it earlier.
Right.
Always happy to discuss it, however, and if I misunderstood the question, then
No, I think that that nailed it. So we have another question now that we'll go to. The attendee says, if I understood correctly, why do you think templates are better for scaling cloud within DevOps?
well, templates, I think that's the main building block of something like infrastructure as code, right? Templates only means that you take a textual format and you say, this is what I want to do with the cloud. And so if you want to automate cloud, you need templates. The big question is, who writes the templates? How do they get access to the means of writing the templates, right? So I think that, yeah, you need to have templates if you want to scale cloud, because that's just a given. You need to have template if you want to automate cloud. Now, if you want to scale, you probably need to have a modular approach to creating these templates, and you need to find a way to give the power to the people in a way to create these templates.
Right. So what do you mean by the modular approach?
Well, what I mean by modular approach is that you can create building blocks that you can, in a way, mix and match, or other people can mix and match in order to create more template variations or to parameterize things, so that not with every little template change, you need to create more, another bottleneck, as in approach number 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a final question that we'll have time for. So I'll just read it and we'll go with it. So can you define perhaps with an example the difference between a configuration and an orchestration?
Yeah, how long do we have?
Yeah, it's a little esoteric.
No, I think that it's a big question today, because it actually goes back to how we are how we look at cloud provisioning and the approach to it, because there are configuration management tools like Ansible. I haven't mentioned Ansible. It's a very common tool, right? But the reason it was built was to do configuration management. So that's actually after the infrastructure is in place, the cloud infrastructure or not, then you can start putting the applications on top of that. But then I think where the world of cloud automation is moving to is really immutable infrastructure, and not dealing that much with changing things on the applications and automating them after the infrastructure is provisioned, but rather looking at the whole thing as an immutable environment that if I need, I can really update by really building from scratch. And then orchestration, or infrastructure as code, maybe becomes very relevant, because it involves starting the whole infrastructure from scratch. And these are tools like CloudFormation, Terraform, and ARM template are really built to do that. And I think this is why you see today some teams that use them in conjunction. You have teams that use Terraform with Ansible, and then it starts getting a little bit messy. All of these things, the configuration and the orchestration and the infrastructure as code, they're all part of what we need to do when we do cloud provisioning. So it's all included in what I talked about. Again, I hope my answer makes some sense.
Right, very good. And do you have an email address or something people can reach you if they want to ask further questions after the event?
Sure. Just I'm happy to get any questions on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest today. So just find me, Maya Bear, on LinkedIn.
Great. All right. Well, Maya, thank you for a great presentation. Really spelled out, the whole provisioning issue, looking at it from the most risk-averse companies to the ones who need to do the most scaling. I thought that was spelled out beautifully. Also would like to thank Quali for sponsoring today's presentation, of course. And I would like to thank all of our attendees for giving us a little bit of their time this afternoon. And we really appreciate that. So until next time, I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times. So long for now.